day you don't show up, I'm gonna be, is he okay? Where did he go? Same with Linda. There's so many people here that are here a lot. It's fantastic. But then if you're not gonna be here, maybe I'll make a rule you have to tell me so I don't worry about it. Oh,
Well, I
Linda,
think
I
we're
try not to miss a single thing. Good for Linda. Awesome. Who is just about to start the Fictionary-Certified Story Coach program on Thursday, which Lucy's teaching. And we're updating the courses with some new things. So hopefully that's ready for Thursday too. Kind of a deadline there.
I think we are ready to get started. Hello, everyone. In the US, today is National Grammar Day. And to celebrate, we're welcoming a very special guest, Ellen Jovin, creator of the Grammar Table and the national bestselling author of Rebel with a Clause. I'm James Gallagher, and today's talk is brought to you by Fictionary, your story editing software. For the next half hour, we're going to get to know Ellen a little better, and we're going to learn all of the amazing things she's doing in the realm of grammar. For those who haven't experienced the grammar table in person, this is a wonderful opportunity to ask Ellen those nagging grammar questions, or to even just get something off your chest that frustrates you about grammar. So as we go, we'll break in when you have questions. Raise your hand, pop questions into the chat, and we'll have a fun, lively discussion. Briefly, Ellen Jovin is the co-founder of Syntaxis, a communication skills training firm, and the author of several books, including the aforesaid Rebel with a Clause. Ellen has a BA in German Studies from Harvard and a master's in comparative literature from UCLA. She studied 25 different languages, and of course, she is the wonder behind the grammar table, which we're going to learn a little bit more about today. Ellen, it is always great to see you. And how are you? Are you having a good National Grammar Day?
It's off to a great start. Thank you so much, James. It's wonderful to see you again.
Well, I do want to also say quickly that everyone should tune in Monday when I believe you're going to be on the Rachel Ray show.
That's right. Yep. There's actually a grammar segment. I'm not doing any cooking.
Oh, you're not doing any cooking.
I'm not doing any cooking. That is not something. I mean, I know how to apply heat, but generally I try to stay in the word domain rather than the kitchen domain.
Yeah, that's probably good. That would be too exciting. I couldn't handle it. So, but that will be, everyone should tune in. That should be amazing. I want to say that I believe my first experience of you was seeing your grammar polls on Twitter. And then probably my best first memory is early in the pandemic, you did a series of online events on sentence diagramming. And I bring that up because I think your infectious enthusiasm for something like sentence diagramming gets at the heart of why you do the things you do. And so I'm wondering, why do you love grammar so much, and why does it light you up the way it does?
I can't really account for the genetics that probably contributed to the state I find myself in, but I just have always found words magical, and that's from all angles. It's not just grammar, it's reading, writing, spelling, it's handwriting. Behind me, I have grammar books, alphabetized from Albanian up there to Zulu down there. I take this stuff very seriously, but also not very seriously. I just think it's fun to play with the thing that connects us as human beings.
Yeah, and you that that goes along a little bit with you have the great shirt today, Grammar Hedonist.
That's
What
right.
what does that mean to everyone? What do you mean by
It
that?
sounds I guess it could be interpreted a little negatively, but I like to think of it as as indicating the way I like to play with language. I like to play with words and sentences. I like to think of very technically sometimes about why something isn't working and shove a word somewhere else and see how it flies and the whole thing starts to work. Um, I was just out in the park, in Central Park before this call, refreshing my Portuguese language skills, which have fallen into a state of disrepair. And it's just so much fun to, I don't know, to think about the grammar. I was actually thinking about the grammar, the word order, the adverb, adjective, noun order in a particular construction, the sound inventory. It just feels like it's endless. You never run out of stuff to do.
Yeah. Well, I think, here at Fictionary, we're writers, we're editors, and I think, everyone appreciates so much that, someone is out there putting such a friendly, kind face on grammar and approaching it in such a kind way. Um, and it's especially important because grammar is something that causes for a lot of people so much anxiety, and it's something that can and definitely has at times been used to separate people. So I love your approach to grammar and how when you're interacting with people, how do you maintain such a kind approach without that sense of what gets sort of stereotyped as a grammar person, that wagging their finger and correcting, but that's not you at all. So how do you maintain this wonderful approach?
Thank you, first of all, for that compliment. It means a lot to me. I'm kind of crabby in a lot of situations in life, so I think that there's something about this that, well, first of all, do you think that is it worthwhile just showing a quick picture so that people who haven't seen it before know what it looks like?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
this is, if you have me pinned, you can see it is literally just a stand. And I hope that you can appreciate that if someone is feeling that I might be a cranky grammarian, just the way this is set up somehow disperses some of that grammar suspicion people might have. I mean, it's just so dorky, that it's already starting out with kind of laughter. But I also, so much of the prescriptivists, people who who advise people on rules and style and things like that, they get a bad reputation. I mean, I'm like most of us, floating between a descriptivist approach to language, that is looking at how it is used rather than this idea of how it should be used, versus prescriptivist. So, I mean, most of us inhabit we wear different hats depending on what we're doing with language. But I'm intensely curious about language variety. One thing that the internet certainly has made available to us, I mean, Netflix, with all, you can watch reality shows from around the world in all different Englishes. It makes it a lot more apparent that there's more variety with English than a lot of people think there is. And so I find it kind of joyous to celebrate that. I also find it kind of amusing when someone comes up to me very determined to be right or certain they are right about something. I don't know, I don't take it personally. It just isn't really maybe when I was younger I would have, but now it's sort of it's kind of I'm curious about why they think that way. And I don't know, there's you can like this one guy I remember was, what was it? Oh, he was annoyed about the word important, and how people pronounce important. So I say important, and other people have more of a, I guess, a glottal stop there, and he didn't like that. So he started I think was insisting that he says important, which is just not actually happening. That's the other thing.
Right.
It's kind of funny. It's funny to hear about how people what people think they do versus see what they really do when they start talking. They do end with a preposition. Weird.
Yeah. Yeah, you see that a lot when someone says, they come out against using something like singular they, and then they've used it three sentences before. So it's
Right.
very, very funny.
Twitter is great for that because when people say they've never done something, I can do a search on their handle and the thing they just said they don't do. And I found people don't like when I do that. So I have to kind of, so it's
Yeah.
weird. Like, it's weird when people don't like having that pointed out on Twitter, but you can find out what people's habits are a lot more easily than you used to be able to.
Well, when I was thinking about this talk this week, something came back to me that I hadn't thought about in literal decades. Do you remember the "Don't say ain't" rhyme?
No, what was it?
It was "Don't say ain't, your mother will faint, your father will fall in a bucket of paint." Do you do you not remember this?
Where did you grow up again?
Maryland.
That's really funny. Well, I grew up in LA and I just didn't really hear a lot of ain'ts, so maybe they didn't feel they had to, that wasn't the thing that people focused on so much with us. There were complaints about the whole Valley Girl thing when I was growing up, but the ain't
Um,
thing didn't come up much. And I noticed, I mean, that came up for me more in the middle of the country uh than other places, but yeah, that's a great rhyme and I am really happy to have learned this new piece of grammar literature from you today. Thank you.
well, if anyone in the chat has heard that, let me know because hopefully it's not something I just dreamed at one point, but I remember hearing that a lot as a child. But and I didn't even say AIDS. I don't think so. I don't know why that was, but um, it is understandable, and as someone who studied a lot of languages, it's understandable why someone finds English grammar um, difficult and frustrating, and why it seems, filled with at least seeming inconsistency. So, why is English such a chaotic language?
Well, it does vacuum up a lot of stuff from other languages, but there's chaos in a lot of languages. I mean, for example, again, the Portuguese example, there's lots of dialect variety, and um, people who look for consistency are doomed to be disappointed in life. So, I
Yes.
mean, we do have editorially inclined types here. So, yes, I mean, part of my job has been in my life to make things more consistent. But I really try. You know what? One of the hardest questions I get at the grammar table, or the category of question I find the most challenging is why. How should I know why this particular? I mean, yes, I could go to a dictionary and tell you the history of the general history, but on a very day to day level, how do we, the words take all kinds of adventures, and I just try to keep up with what's going on and not really worry so much about why, which can also lead you to a lot of apocryphal stories about, etymology that just, I first of all, I can't check on them, but second of all, often they're not true. So anyway, I've lost track of what you asked me, James. I'm getting all hopped up on National Grammar Day. It's just what happens today.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of what you said there is, your approach to grammar is a great approach to life as well. So I think, uh, about looking for consistencies and being disappointed not finding that completely is a great life lesson as well. But let's get into the grammar table because
Okay.
you shared the picture there, so people have a bit of an idea of what it was. But last year I got to see it live at Planet Word in
Oh,
DC.
also, it is really a physical thing, just, so people can see.
Very
And
portable.
I did, yes, some are more I have a couple of different versions. That one's a little heavy, but I've carried that up to 2 miles at a time. So I'm trying to start doing push-ups again so I can get places more easily.
Well, when I tell people about the grammar table, you get a lot of the, wait a minute. So you're telling me what's going on here? Like, people, they're curious, they love what you're doing, Could you tell us a little bit how this got started? What because I think you've been to almost all 50 states now. And
All
what you're
50.
doing, you've been
All
to all
50.
50. Oh,
I've been to
wow.
all 50.
Amazing.
The last two were Alaska and Hawaii. So the final setting for the grammar table, at least on that version, on that tour, was a beach on Oahu, which was pretty. That was some grammar hedonism.
Yeah. That's incredible.
So
How
the
did,
story of how it got started. Oh, so how it got started because I was sick of talking about grammar online. Social media has been great. The internet has been great for language learners. You have access to so many more things, but it can be very enticing. So instead of arguing over accusative versus dative case in a Facebook group, I decided I'd rather be on a sidewalk talking to human beings. And it did require me to check to make sure I was allowed to do that. I wasn't sure if New York has so many regulations and the bureaucracy is so tangled, but it did become apparent to me at a certain point that as long as I wasn't selling the grammar, that I would be permitted to just set up on the street and not blocking traffic. Those are the two key things. So I did it.
and you,
And
as I said, you, and through the grammar table, I mean, you've interacted with people all ages, obviously from all regions. I mean, what has that been like to get that kind of extremely like diverse array of responses to people's grammar?
It's well, it's amazing to see how many people, in spite of the bad reputation that grammar has, to see how many people love talking about language and, not technically just grammar. It's all kinds of things. It can be sentence style. It could be very stylistic things. It is often very stylistic things. It's punctuation. People want to talk about pronunciation as well. But it's been kind of miraculous to see how great it is to get off the computer. I mean, we're on the computer again, but at least we're talking here. So I don't mean to diss the current environment, but it's so important to me to get out in the world and talk to human beings. I also find it wonderful just to see how much surprising variety there is in grammar geeks. Like you just never know who the grammar geek is going to be, and you may think between the two people walking toward you that that the one on the right who has all the stereotypical signs of being a geek is going to come up to you and be the grammar geek, and it's the one with the, I don't know, the leather jacket and the spikes coming out and the giant boots and the purple hair. They're the grammar geek. You never know. Or they could be
Yeah,
5. It could be a little child who's interested in talking about. 10-year-olds seem to gravitate toward the grammar table more than almost any other child age group. So I have a thing, I enjoy the 10-year-old grammar imagination a lot. I feel because we're talking, because of this, the nature of this group, that I should mention just back in the day, when I was a kid, I was fascinated with grammar, but I really think that it was reading stories. I just read nonstop. So reading stories alongside the kind of more systematic um, education I got in grammar. I would never want to isolate the grammar and say, oh, this is what people should study. It was always contextualized for me in the world of art and literature. And to me, it's something very beautiful. I think about the relationship between um, writing artistry and grammar all the time. It's not, oh, that has to have that ending on the end because it's, plural verb second or whatever it is. I mean, I don't really think about it that way. It's always, and so I actually do sometimes say art first, grammar second. It's like I have a hierarchy here. And I think that for the people who think that grammar is all about complaining about what other people do, I think that sort of orients them in terms of my philosophy.
yeah, and I think a lot of times, at least traditionally, the grammar component when taught was separated from the story component. So, it became a very technical thing instead of, a integral part of this other thing that you love so much. So, I think people do learn better. They pick up so much grammar just intuitively through reading. It's a wonderful thing.
They do, but if people hadn't with the way my brain works, if people didn't explain it to me in a systematic way, it would have really bothered me. And I think that's one thing that troubles me when grammar education is bashed. Okay, you can talk about the best ways to do it, but I think actually for a lot of people, I mean a lot of adults who would like more of a systematic sense of where to shuttle things and what to think about. Um, and I don't have an answer to what the best approach is, but I think of what got me hooked is that there were so many different ways of caressing the language. And I mean, and when I think of that, when I think of words and how they're put together, I think of even just forming the letters first in print in first grade and then in cursive in third grade, just writing words, um, looking at them on the page, writing stories, writing answers to questions. It's like a constant linguistic caress with different kinds of instruction coming at it from different angles. And some people hated the sentence diagramming that you mentioned early on. It's very technical. Um, and it involves drawing straight lines, which some people are terrible at. But for me, that really captured my imagination. So you just try to hit kids in as many different ways. I don't hit them with different styles of thinking about language, and ideally some healthy fraction of that, some healthy percentage of that hit clicks for them, and then they love words.
Yeah. I think as a kid, there can be that, having to go to the blackboard anxiety. And so something like sentence diagramming, um, you can come back to years later and, sort of rediscover a love for it, and see how much fun it is to really play with. And I think it lets you play with language in a very different
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
absolutely. And there are different systems for that same thing. It's not the only way to do it. It's just one of multiple, but it does involve understanding the technical elements, which I think can be helpful.
Yeah. Well, and your experiences with the grammar table led into writing this wonderful book, which everyone should read. It's a fantastic um, book filled not with just with um, great grammar tips, but Ellen's experience interacting with people, and it's really a lot about stories and stories of you interacting, and it's funny, it's affecting, and um, how um, how was that experience of taking these, as we talk about, real life interactions and getting them down on paper and getting them out to the world in book form?
Well, one of the biggest challenges was how many people were so freaking hilarious when they talked to me about Oxford commas. It was a huge challenge to figure out which stories I could possibly abandon for that first chapter, because this is such a trivial little thing. The comma, if you don't know that term, the comma before that precedes an and in a list. There's so much play about people get a preference. Some of them want it, some of them don't, and there were so many dramatic defenses that just really cracked me up. Um, some I guess one thing that was a little bit challenging was there are some topics in language that lend themselves more easily to storytelling than others. When you're trying to discuss restrictive and non-restrictive appositives or restrictive and non-restrictive relative clauses, making those, making sure those stories are are well paced. It could be by the time you explain the grammar terms, that was actually a major editing challenge. How to get enough explanation in dialogue or encounters to cover what I thought might be confusing to people. And I get letters now all the time from people who think I should have done this or wish, or they want to follow up on XYZ, or they think I did something wrong. Um, I'm writing a lot of letters these days, a lot more. My grammar correspondence has increased dramatically, which is sort of like the opposite of the point of having a grammar table, now I'm back on the computer. So I'm really trying to resolve that conflict. But I think for me, the it was an education also being physically at the table and talking about language. People are angry about a lot of things these days, it feels like. And so having a focused topic to speak about, something that connects us all, even if we disagree about a comma or a past participle form, um, we have this focused thing to talk about. And it was funny. Sometimes people would approach me grumpy because I guess they worked with people who and ended ideas with prepositions and they didn't like it. But what I found interesting and fun and challenging was seeing if we could take the tone of the conversation a different way. So that's something I'm very interested in as a not as a grammar not I mean, I'm interested in grammatically, but I'm also interested in it as a human being, how real life encounters with dialogue and a focus can take us beyond the animosity that characterizes on even even like very narrow grammar discussions online can get very animated. And it's
Yeah.
much better if you can talk to people in real life, I find.
Well, and that's true. And I think that's one thing people can take from your book as well as everything else is again, your approach and how to, conduct, your conversations in a kind way where, everyone comes away feeling as though they've, interacted in a kind of wonderful exchange. Um,
You
as
know what,
you,
James? I didn't do that well with the guy in Hawaii. This
oh no,
guy in Hawaii, the last state. This guy came up to me, and I didn't
Hmm.
do very well with him. So I just want to confess I had a failing in Hawaii.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I think you have a pretty good record. So um, that's fine. Aside from that guy, um, since since you, I hate that guy. Since you had to make some hard decisions for what stories to include, and you've gone on with the grammar table after the book. Or is there another story that you'd want to get out into the world?
When you say another story, do you mean like another book or another thing that I dumped from that book that I want to?
Yeah, another book, sure, but also like another funny interaction you had along the way that didn't make it into the book. That
Well, I did actually I had too many pages, so I did create a directory with a bunch of the abandoned ones. And I'm finding now that the things that people seem to be concerned about who read the book are sending me in new directions. I don't think I talked about, well, maybe I did. I can't see, the problem is now I'm forgetting what I talked about in the book. But there are I think the family and social dynamics of wanting to correct people about their grammar, I'm getting some pretty funny stories about that. Like someone who corrected his therapist, and then she didn't like that, and then he gave her flowers and she didn't forgive him. That kind of, like, I'm getting these weird stories about real life grammar encounters. So I'm thinking about what to do with those.
hmm,
There's a lot of drama in grammar, more than you'd expect.
yeah, there is, and I know we're coming to the end here, and I want to maybe Shane and Lucy. I don't know if anyone had any questions, but I do want to say one thing too is that for so many of us who are writers and editors, we're naturally very introverted. So the idea that you go out in the world intentionally to talk to people is something that you can be held in a kind of awe. It's amazing.
Well, that's actually a wonderful compliment to me. I had a hard time speaking up when I was a kid, and I don't think it was so much that I was shy, but more that I maybe it was a little shy, but I also feel that I spent so long crafting what I wanted to say in class. For example, when a teacher would ask a question, I would start working on it. And then by the time I had it all together in my head and I was ready to go, she was on to the next person. So, maybe something that I've taken from this adventure is that I can be messier, being a little less in control, a little messier and more playful for me has probably been helpful because I used to be too cautious. And that I think has its own risks. You don't want to miss the things that could happen while you're being overly cautious. And that
Yeah,
wasn't
and I
meant to
think
sound like a reprimand, by the way. That is how I meant it. It's more thinking about how I was. It was very careful. And sometimes you just have to raise your hand and say the thing you want to say.
well, that's a real writing challenge too. Is that first drafts sometimes being messy, just letting it go is the best thing you can do. So do we? We're at the end of our session here, but if there are, Lucy, are you
There's
raising
one
your hand?
question. Yeah, there's just one question in there. Patrick Hanford said, do you have a favorite online thesaurus?
No, I mostly just use thesauruses to remind me of words that are on the tip of my tongue already. So I always just go to thesaurus.com, and I think that's the URL for it, isn't it? Thesaurus.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just do that. It's not something I do a huge amount, but it is when I want to have alliteration and I'm looking at all the synonyms for the one that begins with G to go with grammar.
Well, that was a wonderful, wonderful talk, and we were so thankful that you could join us today. If you want to hang out for just a second after we close out the meeting, we'll wrap things up. But thank you so much for being here, and thank everyone for attending. I hope you came away with a little bit more enthusiasm for grammar, and that everyone has a wonderful rest of their National Grammar Day.
Yes, happy National Grammar Day.
Thank you, Ellen. That was fantastic. Thank you, James, for hosting that. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Fabulous as usual. And yes, we'll end on Happy Grammar Day.